Welcome back to Hidden Source News. Today, we are back for another UFC Fight Night betting card prediction and Draftkings picks show. This week's card is a very difficult one to predict. There are a few fights that I am very conflicted about in terms of who will win, but I did my best tape study and will give you my opinion and what I will be doing with this fight card. As always, please subscribe to the channel to help us grow and provide more and more content. Now, let's get started. This week, we have a banger of a card with many live underdogs and fights that really have unpredictable outcomes. This weekend's UFC Fight Night, DeRitter vs. Allen, brings us a 13-fight card that I've studied thoroughly, and honestly, I have very little confidence in many of these picks, but I'll break them down and give you my full opinion and what my exposure will be. In the main event, we are in the middleweight division with a bout between Reinier DeRitter versus Brendan Allen. In this fight, we have a decent striker in Allen, who also has a solid ground game, going up against DeRitter, who will be trying to get this fight to the ground. If Allen keeps this fight at striking distance and can take DeRitter down and control him, then he'll get the win. However, if DeRitter is able to take Allen down and control him, then it will be a long night for Allen. My pick will be Brendan Allen to take the win, but buyer beware. As I stated, DeRitter does have an avenue to victory. Be careful in hedging your bets. On Draftkings, I will have 40% of my lineups for Allen and 30% for DeRitter. Next up, we are in the welterweight division in a fight between Kevin Holland versus Mike Malott. This is another fight where I see pathways for both fighters. On one hand, we have a striker in Holland with an 81-inch reach, going up against another striker in Malott who has a decent takedown game. In this bout, my pick will be Mike Malott to take the win, as long as he can combine his striking with taking the fight to the ground. If Holland can keep this fight standing and successfully defend the takedowns, then he can get the win. So yeah, buyer beware. On Draftkings, I will have 35% of my lineups for Malott and 25% for Holland. In this next bout in the bantamweight division, we have Marlon Vera versus Ayman Zahabi. In this fight, we have two strikers going up against each other. My pick will be Marlon Vera to take the win. I believe him to be the better striker with solid leg kicks. On Draftkings, I will have 30% of my lineups for Vera and 15% for Zahabi. Now we are in the women's flyweight division in a bout between Manon Fiorot versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. This one I'm honestly split on. On one side, we have a striker in Fiorot going up against a solid striker with good takedown ability in Jasudavicius. If Jasudavicius can employ her strategy, strike effectively, and get Fiorot to the ground and control her, then she'll get the win. But if Fiorot can keep the fight standing, she will likely win. My reluctant pick will be Jasudavicius to take the win, but, buyer beware. I will have very low exposure to this fight and will bet the over and parlay it a few times. On Draftkings, I will have 15% of my lineups for Jasudavicius and 15% for Fiorot. Now we are in the bantamweight division with a bout between Cody Gibson and Ulrich Ealing. Ulrich Ealing is definitely the better striker, but, Gibson has the better ground game. If he's able to get the fight to the ground, I think he'll edge out the win. But if he keeps it standing, Ulrich Ealing will have the advantage. My pick will be Cody Gibson. On Draftkings, I'll have about 30% of my lineups for Gibson and 20% for Ulrich Ealing. We are now in the lightweight division in a bout between Kyle Nelson and Matt Frevola. This bout is also, honestly, pretty difficult to predict. Both of these fighters are strikers, and both have been knocked out in the past. I see pathways for both fighters to take the win, but my pick will be Kyle Nelson. On Draftkings, I'll have equal exposure of about 20% for both fighters. Just be careful betting this one. It can really go either way. My advice is to wait for weigh-ins to see how they look before you make your bets. My exposure will be very limited on this fight. We are back in the bantamweight division in a bout between Charles Jourdain and Davy Grant. In this bout, we've got two strikers going up against each other in what could honestly be one of the best fights of the night. Grant has that no-die attitude and some ridiculous cardio, going up against a technical striker in Jourdain, who is just super accurate. My pick will be Charles Jourdain to take the win, but I do see value in Grant to possibly edge out a win. So, be careful in hedging your bets. On Draftkings, I'll have 30% for Jourdain and 20% for Grant. So, in the flyweight division, we've got a bout between Bruno Silva and Hyun-Sung Park. I'll slightly pick Hyun-Sung Park to take the win, but honestly, my exposure will be very limited here, just because there's some real value in the underdog. If Park doesn't keep his distance and decides to engage in pure striking, Silva definitely has the power to knock him out. But as long as Park isn't a stationary target, outstrikes Silva, and can stop the takedowns, I believe he can edge out the victory. On Draftkings, I'm planning to have about 35% of my lineups for Park and 20% for Silva. Moving on to the middleweight division, we have a bout between Danny Barlow and Jordan Santos. In this fight, we're looking at two strikers going head-to-head, and I'm going with Danny Barlow here. Santos is a solid striker, but he tends to be pretty stationary, which honestly gives Barlow a perfect target to capitalize on. On Draftkings, I'll have 35% of my lineups for Barlow and 15% for Santos. Now, we're back in the lightweight division with a fight between Kyle Prepolek and Drew Dober. In this one, I'm picking Drew Dober to take the win. I just see Dober as the more durable and better striker, plus he's got some solid wrestling. On Draftkings, I'll have 40% of my lineups for Dober and 10% for Prepolek. Alright folks, here we are in the women's strawweight division, featuring a bout between Stephanie Luciano and Ravena Oliveira. In this matchup, I've got to say, I'm picking the better fighter in Stephanie Luciano to take the win. She just has more experience under her belt and should be able to defend against those takedown attacks from Oliveira. Let's see how this one unfolds. Now, in the middleweight division, we have a fight between Azamat Bekov and Yusri Belgaroui. In this fight, we've got a striker in Belgaroui going up against another striker, but with some pretty good takedown ability in Bekov. My pick will be Azamat Bekov to take the win. On Draftkings, I'll have about 35% of my lineups for Bekov and 10% for Belgaroui. In the last fight, we're in the women's bantamweight division with a bout between Melissa Croden and Tiara Lisboa. In this one, we have an all-around fighter in Croden going up against a striker in Lisboa. I'll be picking Melissa Croden to take the win. With her mix of striking and takedowns, I see a pretty clear pathway for her. On Draftkings, I'll have 35% of my lineups for Croden and 8% for Lisboa. Well, that's it for this Fight Night breakdown. Honestly, I'll be keeping just a small amount of money on this card since it's just a bit too volatile to commit a large sum on bets, parlays, and Draftkings. Be careful with your bets. There's a better card coming up next week with stronger options for winning, so yeah, hedge smart. Please leave a comment letting me know who you'll be betting on or how you all made out. I'd really love to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us grow. As always, may the betting gods be with us. Good luck, and bet responsibly.